The following programming is EI, educational and informative.
Today on Mystery Hunters, we're getting to the bottom of some appearing and disappearing bodies.
I'm headed down one of the most dangerous rivers in America in search of a pair of newlyweds who vanished without a trace. Doubting Dave's gonna show you how you can make someone disappear right before your family's eyes.
Now watch carefully.
And I'm going to Denmark to investigate the body of a man found buried in a bog. Who put him there and why? This is Mystery Hunters.
We'll be right back with more Mystery Hunters. We now return to Mystery Hunters.
Could two people take a ride down a river and then suddenly disappear into thin air? Glenn and Bessie Hyde disappeared on their honeymoon in 1928. It was an adventure trip through the Grand Canyon in a boat they specially built, but it ended with a mystery. This is actual footage of the searchers finding the Hyde's boat. It was floating in calm water, undamaged, everything still inside. Except Glenn and Bessie. They had vanished without a trace. What really happened to the honeymoon couple? I'm going to the Grand Canyon. I'm gonna ride the rapids on the Colorado River like they did. And maybe I'll find out.
Hang on.
This is the fun stuff. Brad Dimmick is a river guide who knows these dangerous rapids well. He also knows a lot about this mystery. So this is where the search party found their boat?
Yeah, and it was fully loaded. It had all their food, their money, their guns, but they had vanished without a trace.
But they did find Bessie's diary. These were her last words. Friday the 30th. This ends the notes. Did she know that something was about to happen? You know, if you sit around campfires in the canyon, late at night, you'll probably hear a few stories about what might have happened to Glenn and Bessie.
A friend of mine was running a river trip about 40 years after Glenn and Bessie disappeared.
Brad told me a story about how his pal George Billingsley had an older woman named Liz Cutler in his group. They were sitting around a campfire one night when she said, "I'm Bessie Hyde." They asked her, "What happened to Glenn?" And she said, "We had a fight, and I stabbed him." So, was Bessie Hyde still alive 40 years later? Could she have stabbed Glenn, hiked out of the canyon, and lived on as Liz Cutler? They were on their honeymoon. I mean, why would Bessie want to hurt her husband?
Well, I don't know, but look at this.
These pictures of Glenn and Bessie were taken only a few weeks before they disappeared. They don't seem too happy. Did Glenn and Bessie really have a big fight?
The river can be a pretty scary place.
Who took these photos?
Emery Kolb took this one.
Emery Kolb, a local photographer and a friend of the Hydes. They stopped to get their picture taken during that fateful trip. His photo studio is up there, a 9-mile hike up that ridge. I'm gonna go up there and have a look. Maybe I can find something out.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Uriah. I'm investigating the disappearance of the Hydes in 1928. Emery died a few years ago. Now Virginia manages the studio. I found out that this photo was taken here by Emery Kolb.
Yes. You know, he was probably one of the last people to see them alive. Follow me. When Emery Kolb died in 1976, his family came here to the garage to clean out his possessions. And inside, they found a canoe. And in the canoe was an old, dried-out skeleton.
Could this be where Glenn Hyde ended up?
This bog in Denmark holds a dark secret. In 1950, two brothers were digging here for peat to burn. But instead of fuel for their stoves, they found the body of a man. The man had no identification, and the police found no evidence to help them figure out why he was buried there. They found his body 50 years ago, but who he was and why he was buried in the bog is still a mystery. Can I see the file of the man found in the bog?
That's a long time ago, but I'll do my best. At first, we took his fingerprints. Next, we looked at the body. We saw he died by hanging because of his rope around the neck.
They couldn't identify him, so they called him Tolland Man after the place where he was found, and the case was closed. But why close the file without investigating who he was or why he was put in the bog?
To find out, we have to go into a time machine because he died 350 BC.
350 BC. That's over 2,000 years ago. I'm on the trail of a 2,000-year-old mystery, and I'm about to see a 2,000-year-old body. This is the Silkeborg Museum, where Tolland Man now rests. Whoa, there he is, the 2,000-year-old man. You can still see the way his face must have looked. How come he's so well preserved? And why was he hanged with that rope? I'm going to find out.
You ever wonder what happens at the moment you go from being alive to being dead? That's what Alicia and Sophie Liddell from Whirl UK want to know. Take a look on the Mystery Illustrator. Dear Doubting Dave, a friend of ours at school told us that when you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes. Is this true? Thanks, bud. My pleasure. Well, girls, unfortunately, we can't ask dead people what they saw when they passed on. But there are people who have died. Then they came back to life after a few seconds. It's called a near-death experience. And almost 1 out of every 3 people who report having a near-death experience say they saw their lives flash before their eyes. Now, you're probably wondering, how could that happen? And the answer is, in your brain. Scientists believe that dying causes chemical reactions in your brain. And a certain kind of chemical reaction can actually open up the part of your brain that stores memories. That could explain why some people see their lives flashing before their eyes when they die. In fact, some people who have epileptic seizures also report seeing their lives flash before their eyes. And we know that seizures are caused by a chemical reaction in the brain. But the truth is, mankind is just beginning to study the human brain. And we're a long way from having it all figured out. So if you really want to know the answer to your question, Sophie and Alicia, ask me again in about 100 years. Whoops, must have put it in backwards.
We'll be right back with more Mystery Hunters. We now return to Mystery Hunters.
Glenn and Bessie Hyde mysteriously disappeared on a rafting trip in 1928. Could Bessie have killed her husband and lived on as Liz Cutler? Emery Kolb was a photographer who knew the Hydes. After he died, the police found what they thought was a clue.
They found it in this garage.
An old canoe with an unusual passenger. Was that Glenn's body that they found? Where are the bones now?
I believe they're at the county morgue.
The authorities asked Dr. Walter Birkby to examine the skeleton. The skull looks like it's damaged.
Good perception.
Dr. Birkby shows me an x-ray of what caused the damage. A bullet. So you think somebody killed this person?
Well, either intentionally or accidentally. Let me show you something else. This is a clay reconstruction of the face.
So you know they're the bones of a man?
That's correct. These are very large bones, so we know it goes to a male.
Okay, it's a male, but is this Glenn's skeleton? I can see some similarity. Maybe it's Glenn. One of the stories circulating on the river is that Glenn was a bully, that he forced Bessie to finish the trip against her will. So she could have turned to Emery for help. Maybe Emery Kolb shot Glenn to save Bessie from getting hurt on the river. Except, I remembered what Virginia told me at Kolb's studio.
When Emery Kolb discovered that the hides had no life jackets, he offered them his, but they refused.
Seems like Kolb wanted to help, not hurt Glenn. But what about Liz Cutler? I mean, she admitted to stabbing Glenn. That's the story she told around a campfire many years after Bessie disappeared.
Most of the people around the fire that night didn't take Liz all that seriously. Just figured she was making for a good tale.
And Liz and Bessie don't really look that much alike. And I found out that Liz Cutler was 4 inches shorter than the real Bessie Hyde. So if Liz wasn't Bessie, then what happened to the real Bessie Hyde?
I think the best evidence of that is about 5 miles upstream from where they found the boat.
It looks like I'm gonna have to brave the rapids of the mighty Colorado River and face whatever danger might have got Glenn and Bessie Hyde.
He was buried in a bog in Denmark over 2,000 years ago. I wonder who he was and why he was put there.
Hello, Christina.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Christian Fisher is helping me to unravel the mystery of Tolland Man. He's so well preserved, he even has stubble on his face. So he's a mummy.
Yes, his turned out to be a mummy, perhaps one of the best mummies of the world.
Tolland Man is a naturally made mummy. Totally by accident, the chemicals in the ground where he was buried preserved his body for thousands of years. And there was something strange about the way he was buried.
You can see eyes are closed, mouths are closed, and he is put in a sleeping position. They treated him very carefully.
But if he was a man that was executed, why was he buried with such care? This 2,000-year-old case is getting stranger by the minute. If only I could find out more about the day that he died.
Would you like to see the contents of his stomach?
2,000-year-old digested food? Gross. Of course I want to see it. Maybe Tolland Man's last meal will offer a clue about his death. I see seeds. Some of them look like they might be burnt. What's it made up of?
It was a gruel porridge composed of a seed from wild flowers and barley and flax.
His last meal was a kind of porridge. I want to know what Tolland Man's last meal was like. So I collected some seeds, like the ones found in his stomach, and made the same gruel. Ugh. Yuck. That was awful. If that was his last meal, maybe he was some kind of prisoner. That would explain the rope. I wonder if there are any other clues in the same bog where he was found. Wait a minute. Here's something. All this stuff was also found in the bog. They found weapons, pots, jewelry, and all kinds of items from daily life. Paulina Singh is a museum director who studied the Tolland Man. Why do you think people buried all these things there?
The objects we find in the box, they've all put there some kind of a sacrifice, I think, for the gods.
So these objects that were buried in the bog with Tolland Man were gifts to the gods. They thought that in return for the gifts, the gods would give them the things they needed to survive. But when life went really badly, like when there was no food or really bad weather, it was time for a special gift.
People knew in the society that now we must give the gods the biggest sacrifice, a human.
So maybe Tolland Man was a human sacrifice. But why him? Why was he the one who was chosen? Did he do something wrong?
Anything that disappears without a trace is a little disturbing, but disappearing people, that's seriously creepy. Of course, course, magicians make people disappear all the time. And you can too.
If you dare.
All you need is a paper napkin and a very little person. Now watch carefully. This little guy is actually a magician, and he does a great trick, but he needs a curtain around him to hide the secret. And note that there are no trapdoors underneath him. Now watch very carefully as he grows in front of you. Okay, he does a better trick. The one where he disappears. So how do you do it? Watch carefully. The secret is making the audience look in the wrong place at the right time. When you lift your napkin-covered magician to show that there's no trapdoor underneath him, you bring him all the way back to the edge of the table. Then, while your other hand knocks, you relax your grip on the napkin just enough to let the magician slide out and land on your lap. If you're careful not to crush it, your napkin will stay in the same shape as when your magician was inside. But no one will be looking there anyway because they will all be watching your other hand knocking on the table. Then, bring your hand back to the middle of the table and crush your other hand down on the napkin. Now, I know the disappearing person trick we just did doesn't really explain how Glenn and Bessie Hyde vanished into thin air, but it is a good reminder that there's always more than one explanation for any mystery. This is why I can't have nice things.
We'll be right back with more Mystery Hunters. We now return to Mystery Hunters.
I'm on the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, searching for a honeymoon couple who disappeared in 1928.
Come on, Orion.
We're heading to the place Brad believes holds the answer to what happened to the Hydes, the infamous Mile 232.
Hey, now, I see we're coming down to a corner here, and you see some waves popping? That's Mile 232 rapid.
Doesn't look so bad.
Wait till you see what's around the corner.
We're gonna try to steer left, around two huge rocks. Was this where Glenn and Bessie met a watery end? And what will those sharp rocks they call the fangs do to us? Hard enough for us making it through this. Imagine doing this on a wooden boat. That's crazy.
So, how about that?
That was fun. I did it. I made it through the rapids. But I was in a special boat. It's made for this type of water. Glenn and Bessie were in a heavy wooden boat.
I think it's a combination of the fangs and the boat that they were in where they couldn't miss it. Well, here it is, Orion. This is a sweep scow. Come on up.
This copy of the Hyde's boat was built by Brad and his wife. They ran the rapids just like Glenn and Bessie.
So just imagine how violent this would be in the rapids, bouncing around in these huge 150-pound sweeps, slamming back and forth when they get caught by a wave. Glenn and Bessie very possibly ran this thing right into the fangs, and when those sweeps catch, they could have hit him in the chin like that. They could have knocked him in the guts, could have knocked him unconscious, and they could have drowned.
And Glenn and Bessie weren't wearing life jackets.
Good point. They were wearing heavy wool, leather jackets, things that would just be terrible to swim in.
But their boat made it through pretty much undamaged.
Well, we crashed this thing very violently. We could never find any damage at all. The boat is extremely tough.
So you say it was a boating accident?
I think the boating accident precipitated it, you know, whether they both drowned or just one drowned and the other died trying to hike out. It's hard to say.
Hey. What about the skull with the bullet hole from Kolb's garage? Dr. Birkby was able to figure out the age of the skeleton.
Is probably less than 25 years of age, certainly.
Glenn was 29. And the skeleton's build didn't match Glenn either.
This guy was massive. We can tell that by looking at the femur.
Glenn was pretty thin built.
Yeah.
But I could see people saying this looks like him.
Glenn has a much longer and narrower face. This has a fairly short, squat face and is a bit broader.
So in your opinion?
My opinion, this is not Glenn Hyde.
So why would Cole keep a skeleton in his garage?
It's something that he found along the rim. He didn't know whose it was. It seemed interesting, fun to show to people. His grandson remembers assembling it on the dining room table on rainy days, just for fun.
So you're not surprised that Glenn and Bessie never turned up?
I'm not. Most bodies in those days did not turn up. It would have been more amazing if they had. It's a very remote area. Even now, people disappear without a trace.
We may not know exactly what happened to Glenn and Bessie, but I'll tell you one thing I do know. Their story will be told around Colorado campfires for a long time to come.
Tolland Man was buried over 2,000 years ago in the same bog where offerings were left for the gods. Could he have been the victim of human sacrifice? And why him? Was he some kind of prisoner? Or was there some other reason? I discovered an ancient Celtic ritual that was performed when times were really bad and they wanted help from their gods. Maybe this is what happened to Tolland Man. The people in the community would pass around a container with pieces of cake or bread in it, and the person who got the only burnt piece was the one chosen. Remember the charred seeds found in Tolland Man's stomach? What do you think could have been happening for them to resort to human sacrifice?
Perhaps there's been bad weather for some years. There's perhaps been illness among the members of the tribe.
So to try to bring life back to normal, they made the ultimate sacrifice to their gods.
And perhaps the most important sacrifice was a human being. That could be the Tolland Man.
He may not have minded being offered as a sacrifice to the gods. Because his people were having hard times, and he felt he was nearing the end of his life. Tolland Man was about 40, which was pretty old back then. So Tolland Man could be a hero because he thought he was saving his people.
It was the last good thing he could do in his life.
The mystery of Tolland Man may not be entirely solved, but at least I know enough about him to close his file for good. Children who visit Tolland Man today like to pretend he's asleep and don't want to wake him up. He continues to keep his dream secret from us after 2,000 years.
So there might be all kinds of bodies buried in the bog?
Totally. In fact, they're not just in Denmark either. They're all over the place.
That's right. In the 80s, police in Cheshire, England suspected a man of murdering his wife and burying her in the backyard 20 years earlier. But they had no evidence against him. When a female mummified corpse turned up in the peat bog behind his house, he confessed to the whole thing. Then they discovered the corpse was over 1,000 years old. Too late. He already owned up.
I guess I should offer you some.
No way. I've been doing this show long enough to know that that's probably something disgusting.
Awesome. I hate sharing.
No, wait. Okay, I'll have a bit.
Fine.
What is this?
Gruel from Tolland Man's stomach. I guess sometimes things are exactly what they seem.